Well, hello. I'm Matt Williamson. How's everyone doing? I'm great. I'm refreshed. Not a little more rest since the terrible travel stuff, but I'll quit complaining about that. I spent the whole week at a wonderful beach, Turks and Caicos, so life is good. Again, ready. I'll be honest, we got like a month here until camp. It's almost exactly. I mean, Thursday, the last Thursday of July is the first Steeler practice, so we basically have a month until yours truly moves into the dorms in Latrobe, and I'm there every day, like the group. And so we have a month here of some downtime. There'll be a little bit of news here and there, but it's going to be tough. But, so I'm pretty psyched for camp already, to be honest. I mean, now that I came home from vacation, I'm charged up. We'll do some cookouts and all that good stuff around here, and we have some other small vacations planned, but I'm pretty psyched up for the season. So I'm eager to get to Latrobe. I'm eager to see pads popping and one-on-ones and all that good stuff. But we are doing Mailbag today, which is quickly becoming maybe my favorite episode of the week. I mean, you guys ask great questions. You really do. And I leave some really good ones off because there's so many. Michael Bradley starts with this conversation. I don't like how TJ has become one-dimensional. Okay. When we had a dominant front three, he moved around, dropped into coverage, etc. Could that version return in 2024 with Benton and a healthy Cam? This is interesting because I think there are 5 elite edge rushers on the planet right now. Watt, Garrett, Parsons, Bosa in San Francisco, and Max Crosby. So if you're not asking him to do that, well, one of the best things in the league isn't being done. Like when the Saints put Taysom Hill out there for Drew Brees, yeah, they averaged like 6 yards a play, but the Hall of Fame quarterback's on the sideline. Now, unlike those other guys, I do agree with you that TJ is really good at covering the flats. He's remarkable, like his brother, at batting down passes, even from an off-the-ball position, destroying screens, things of that nature. But also, I think that the league, the Steelers' defense, has changed dramatically. I mean, people have a misnomer that this defense is still Dick LeBeau, a front three, and outside linebackers that drop into coverage 30-40% of the time. It's really a front four more than anything, including Watt on the left, Highsmith on the right, 2 guys on the inside. And I am in favor of dropping him here and there because the protection schemes on the other side, they always know he's coming from the quarterback's right, which I don't love, but I don't think that's going to change. He's comfortable with it. It's working, blah, blah, blah. So they roll their protections that way. And if he doesn't come, you might have a back or a tight end to the quarterback's right, really not doing much. And, and you're bringing an overload blitz from the blind side or whatever. And again, Watt is very capable in protection or in coverage in the short zones. Side note, I do think it's pretty remarkable that if you go back and look at like Porter and Gilden and the LeBeau, quote, 3-4 outside linebackers, the numbers of sacks they got, despite not rushing the quarterback on anywhere close to like 80% of the pass rush snaps, is pretty amazing. I mean, that group is a little bit underrated just from that regard. But the game has changed so much. I don't call him one-dimensional. I mean, that's like saying Nick Bosa's one-dimensional. We won Defensive Player of the Year 2 years. I mean, like, he's awesome at what he does. It's a high important, skill that he has. But Watt does bring a lot more to the table. I mean, I mentioned some of them, as well as being unbelievably good at, getting the football out, causing fumbles, reading screens and things like that of that nature. But I hear what you're saying. But if your pitcher throws 100, let him throw 100. You know what I mean? We don't need to invent a knuckle curve. I mean, he does what he does really, really well. And the offense sure isn't happy when he's just, quote, just rushing the passer. We'll get to Benton here in a minute too, though. So Bet Online is your number one source for your summer sports this season, from baseball, golf, everything you can dream of. All the latest stats, news, and scores available to follow your favorite teams. Get the latest odds and lines, including the latest team matchups, player props, and odds on just about every sport out there. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Bet online, where the game starts. Skip Bittman asks, I don't expect Freiermuth to be Travis Kelce, but can he be like Mark Andrews? He gets hurt a lot and doesn't get a lot of yak, though that might have been Canada's offense. I will say yards after the catch sure were not a specialty of Matt Canada's route concepts, and Freiermuth might have been the victim of that as much as anyone. They had a lot of bump a defensive end, turn around 2 yards downfield, get tackled type routes. I don't think he'll ever be a great after the catch tight end. I also think I'm a Freiermuth fan. I've told you many times I would and I expect them to extend him sooner than later, and before the season. And I expect him to be, as constructed right now, the number 2 receiving target on this offense. I mean, it's going to be a more tight end centric offense. But Mark Andrews is pretty lofty. Yeah, I mean, Kelce is extremely lofty. I think Kelce and Gronk, I prefer Gronk, are the best 2 tight ends that have ever lived. And we know, like you mentioned, Skip, I mean, we don't expect him to be Travis Kelce, and he won't be. I'm not sure anybody will. But Mark Andrews is, if you just look at like receiving yards per game all time among tight ends, he's really high on the list. I mean, like, I'm not saying he's going to the Hall of Fame, but he's a pretty easy Pro Bowler year after year when healthy. Really fits Lamar as a middle of the field thrower. Lamar's not a great deep passer. Wilson's a great deep passer. Lamar's a great middle of the field thrower. Wilson's not a great middle of the field thrower, and neither is Fields for that matter. So I don't think things set up as well, for Freiermuth compared to Andrews, again, who's a top 5 tight end all day long. He might be number 2 or 3. So I think that's a little lofty, but I see where you're going. I mean, 85% of that? Yeah. And that's worth the money. That's worth the investment. That's a win. James D asked me, based on recent signings, are QBs and wide receivers being overvalued in terms of percentage of salary cap? I think it's a little bit of the wild, wild west with these 2 positions contracts because they're just massive. But I think the key here is percentage of salary cap. Because if you look at history, like the Justin Jefferson contract, which is the biggest, of course, of all these wide receivers or ever, is right in line like when Larry Fitzgerald and Calvin Johnson got paid in terms of percentage of cap. The bottom line is the league, and especially the owners, which are the league, are extremely healthy right now. That's what all these things are telling us. The cap keeps going up. COVID is the only time it slowed it down. And probably be even higher if COVID didn't exist. We're getting betting money into the league. There's a lot of money to go around. I don't think quarterbacks can be overvalued. I think that's almost impossible to occur. But wide receiver is a different story and could be a podcast in itself. And it's also very Steeler relevant in that I could see teams, maybe the Steelers, I don't know, saying, I'm not interested in paying $25 million to a wide receiver, maybe Pickens when the time comes. I'm on Ross St. Brown money or Nico Collins even, or, some of these big contracts that you reference, because every year the league infuses us with a rookie crop of receivers that we like, and I think there's a lot of truth to that. I wonder, and maybe like the Packers are the perfect example here of, if we just draft one on day 2, like rounds 2 through 4, if you draft a receiver every year and let the guy go at the end of his contract, you probably have a stacked receiver room. Jalen Reed, Dobbs, Wicks, Watson. And the Steelers are sort of in that mold too, in terms of developing. You could have a very cheap young receiver room year after year after year if you just drafted one every year. And you don't have to hit on all of them. If you draft one every year, if you hit on 50% of them, you're in good shape. You could even trade them going into their contract year, maybe for a first-round pick if it's an Ayuk or something like that, but probably for a little less. But you could just keep replenishing things and have very little invested there. And then maybe you pay your stud tackles that you drafted these past 2 years big money instead. I think that's a possibility. But it's a passing league, and there's certainly a ripple effect to these big time contracts. I mean, I think the league is telling us we value receivers more than ever. I have no problem giving AJ Brown and Devontae Smith 25 to 30 million because defenses hate playing against them, you know. But I do think that's I always talk about this. Like if we were to write a book about the history of the wide receiver position in the NFL, 2024 would be a really interesting chapter when we look back. Two more. What position group is the best for the Steelers and worst, excluding the obvious wide receiver? I think also quarterback's got to be worst. I mean, you got to compare them. I'm excited about Wilson Fields, you know, but you got to beat Lawrence, Jackson, Burrow, Mahomes, Allen, on and on and on and on, you know. So it's not one of the strongest position groups in the league, let alone the AFC. So I think quarterback's right there. It's definitely wide receiver. Maybe corner. But other than wide out, I don't see, and quarterback's a little too easy, I don't see a bad position. So I'm kind of reaching on that a little bit. What position group is the best? I would have to say it's Watt and Highsmith and Herbig. I mean, we talked about the value of Watt. Unbelievable player. Highsmith's a high-end starter. Really excited about Herbig. Could a year from now we be saying it's the O-line? I don't think that's crazy, but to say it now is a little bonkers, getting ahead of ourselves. Crypto for Life asks, what intangibles can Russell Wilson bring to an offense to make it successful? In terms of intangibles, I think even end of career Ben had a lot of value of understanding the speed of the game, understanding checks and blitzes and what defenses are trying to do. I mean, the experience factor is, even when Ben wasn't himself anymore, was missed in previous seasons. And I think you'll have that in spades with Wilson. That in itself, I think, has a lot of value. I mean, he doesn't throw a lot of picks. He throws a lot of touchdowns. Those aren't intangibles. But I do think knowledge of the game, and he's not considered Peyton Manning at the line of scrimmage or, you know, a microprocessor. I mean, I'm not saying he's dumb or anything like that, but just the fact that he's played so much football at this level in itself has a lot of value. And if you're down in the fourth quarter, he's been there 1,000 times. You know, that kind of stuff to me absolutely has value. Last one, Joey Bag of Donuts, is Keanu Benton the next dominant D lineman like Hargrave or Tuitt? This kind of reminds me of the Freiermuth to Mark Andrews conversation. Like, Joey, I love where you're shooting on this, and I love Benton, even more so than I like Freiermuth. But dominant D lineman like Hargrave and Tuitt is a tier that he could get to, but boy, that'd be a home run. I mean, I hope some of younger folks or just been a little out of sight, out of mind, don't forget how good Tuitt was, especially on his best days. And I don't think Steeler fans even saw Hargrave on his best day. I mean, I've said this many times that if money was not an issue, Hargrave's are the one I think that broke their heart the most that they had to let go because they were paying Tuitt and Hayward, you know. So these guys on their best day are top 10 interior D linemen. Could Benton be always in that conversation? Yeah. But if we roll the dice 20 times, that happens 2 out of 20, 3 out of 20. You know what I mean? I mean, there's Chris Jones and Dexter Lawrence and Simmons and Quinnen Williams. And, you know, I mean, there's so many unbelievably great defensive tackles in this league. Could he be on the fringe of the 8th to 15th one for the next 5 years? Yeah. And boy, you'd take that a ton. And I guess in a way, Hargrave and Tuitt were in that neighborhood, you know, at their best day. But boy, I remember those two, especially Hargrave, once he left Pittsburgh, just being so dominant. I mean, that would be, again, kind of like Freiermuth hitting Mark Andrews levels. I mean, don't forget what Tuitt brought to the table. Boy, was he unbelievably talented. And when he was on his best, was better than Hayward at times. I mean, that's how good he was. So we're aiming pretty high. All right, folks, this was fun, as always. Get back to you soon. All right, take care.